Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Meso. Today we're going to continuing series Model Museum, where I review every single Model 1, Model 2, and Model 3 arcade game in a retrospective fashion that is not a racing game because I did that one last year. And today we have one of my favorites on Model 2. It's going to be Gunblade New York, and this is running on the Model 2B revision spec. Now this was released in 1995 just after the launch of the PlayStation 1, and when you were in arcades and you saw this level of 3D after you played your PlayStation 1 at home, you realized that Sega was so far beyond what anything was capable of in the home market. It is just absolutely spectacular and 100% love it. Before you get too far involved, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below as well. But Gunblade New York is part of a series. There's a second game, it's called LA Machine Guns, and there was supposed to be a third game, and it was supposed to be a trilogy. We never got that, so these two games stand on their own. And if there was ever a Sega arcade game begging for a virtual reality conversion, Gunblade New York is 100% going to be that. Basically, in the game, you are flying around in a helicopter. You never see it. It seems like it goes into some impossible spaces. But all of the swooping, sweeping camera angles and all of the motion in this game just add to the sensation of absolute action-packed goodness. Obviously, if you can't tell already, this is a light gun game, but it uses an XY coordinate, so it is slightly different on the technology standpoint, which makes it a lot easier to play at home, and I am playing this on the Model 2 emulator. This is basically Virtua Cop, and Virtua Cop ran at 10x speed the entire time. You were constantly shooting enemies, there's constant explosions all around you. This is like playing an action movie at home in an arcade setting, and I just absolutely love it. Of course, you got to talk about the Model 2 look as well. This is aged super well. Of course, some of the characters are going to be blocky. There's not a ton of polygons, but all of the texture work, all of the colors that the Sega artist chose, just go to make a game that does still look incredible in my opinion. And I love these kind of pseudo 3D wireframe effects when you see the map as well. But this is the type of game that Sega was so good at making back in the day. From start to finish, it is pure action. You put your quarters in, you hit start, and as long as you still have life left, you are constantly going to be shooting at something. It basically takes place in New York City, around the area, and it is such a fun setting, and I love how bright and vibrant it is, but you do get some nighttime shots as well later on that do kind of mix up everything in the game. And I would say this game is relatively not too cruel either. Once you get to the hard mode, you're definitely going to be using a couple continues, but this game is very fair. It treats the player like if you make a mistake, it is your fault. It's not the game trying to just get some more credits off of you. And as far as difficulty in an arcade game is concerned, that's about the best you can possibly say about it. But again, this game is just so wholly unique, and I can't think of another light gun shooter that really does anything like this. Of course, you had Virtua Cop that was very similar to Time Crisis, which is very similar to the House of the Dead. But Gunblade New York, its movement, its speed, its overall presentation and gameplay style does feel completely different than anything else anyone, including Sega, was doing back in the day, and I really do love that. It is a breath of fresh air after you played the House of the Dead or Virtua Cop one too many times. And it's just such a funny and unique story as well. For what is here, you are not shooting bad guys, you're actually shooting robots, and as you shoot them, you will see their flesh chunk off, and there is basically a T2 Terminator underneath them. It's a really interesting thing, probably to get around violence guidelines, because you're not actually shooting humans in the game, you are shooting robots. But as we move further into the game, you're going to see different settings, and this game really sings when you get into an open area with big buildings around. All of the swooping camera angles, all of the enemies diving out of the way, all of the different things going on at once. When you are playing this game well, it feels like magic, shooting those incoming missiles, having enemies leap at you and out of the way, getting that aiming reticle over them and destroying them. When you are on in this game, the sensation of fun and speed is second to none on any other Model 2 game in my opinion. I do know that sometimes people say that this game makes them slightly motion sick to watch. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if that is true. I never have any issues with it whatsoever, but I do hear that is a semi-complaint about the game, that maybe it moves too fast and it swings the camera a little bit too much. I'd assume in VR this might be a Vomitron, but I would still love to try it because there's so many great Sega games that never made it out of arcades. But interestingly, this did come to the Nintendo Wii with LA Machine Guns as a compilation. It is a lot of fun there, but I also love this game's soundtrack. It is classic Sega through and through. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds. I'll come back and tell you more about the history of the game. Enjoy!
Heads up, boys! Destroy terrorist headquarters.
Absolutely awesome soundtrack that 100% fits the theming of the game because it just sounds like you're listening to an action movie while you're playing a Sega arcade game. Of course, it does have some wonky voice acting, but it wouldn't be a Sega arcade game without that. And as we get to the final stage in the easy campaign, I just love this ship, and do be aware there's an easy and a hard campaign to go through, so this is just the first half of the game. But the boss battles are absolutely epic. The stern of this ship just 100% blows up, and this gigantic mech just shoots out, hitting these missiles right in your general direction. The screen is rocking back and forth, and not only do you have to focus on hitting the boss, you also have to shoot those missiles out of the air. The bosses are not easy, but they are such a huge spectacle. I just absolutely love this as you have that golden hour sunset in the background. This is what I crave when I think of Sega arcade games from the 90s. Something like Gunblade NY, just from start to finish, absolutely does it for me. And I even love these explosions with that Model 2 looking polygon thing going on. It has a very specific look. It is only of this generation. I do really have a lot of nostalgia for it. But let's move on to the hard campaign here, because we're going to be going over the Brooklyn Bridge. Interestingly, when I lived in Brooklyn, I went over this every single day for work, and I do not remember anything like this ever happening. This has some Virtua Cop vibes to it when you're chasing around people in the city, but because you're so much more elevated, you're not in a vehicle, but you're in a helicopter. With all of these swooping camera angles, it reminds you of Virtua Cop in all the best ways without feeling like it's ever retreading similar territory. And that is a good thing when it reminds you of an incredible game, but it doesn't remind you of it so much that you feel like it's just a carbon copy. Because I'm sure developers and artists at Sega had difficulty in this generation trying to make things new and fresh. There was only so many arcade genres, and if you have a House of the Dead and a Virtua Cop, how do you make something like Gunblade NY and make it unique? You know, you have all of these different sweeping camera angles and all of this action going on. Now, interestingly, you'll see I just took that helicopter down there, the Area 1 boss in hard mode, and it is by far the easiest boss in the entire game, so I'm not sure how that happened, if it's a bug, but it really just genuinely is a super easy encounter. And I love when we get close to the ground as well. We're not always sweeping around in the helicopter up high. We really do drop down. You get a good look at those enemies, all of the polygons are made out of, and you get that in-your-face shooting action that feels closer to something like a House of the Dead. And I love that the hardware is capable of putting all of those different bullet impact filters and textures on top of objects. It really does make the game feel like it is encountering a living, breathing world. And that's what I mean when I say this game is just so good. But again, in hard mode, the second area boss, shoot this missile down. We did it. We never got hit. For some strange reason, the gameplay in hard mode is harder, but the bosses seem to be easier. It's a really odd thing. As we move on to the nighttime scape here as well, going through the city, I think this is one of the best looks in a Sega game ever once they actually go into the dark nighttime. And the soundtrack in this area, again, a 10 out of 10, I love it. Go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. It's just great stuff, but if there is one strike I would give the game, that lock-on beeping does drive you a little bit nuts, and you're going to be hearing it a lot in the game. And I do wish that the sound effect for the bullets was just a little bit lower, so you could hear the soundtrack a little bit better, but that's just what happens in light gun games. All of those rapid-fire shots are going to cover that audio up. And the final boss, again, it's still the same boss that you saw in the first area, just slightly reconfigured, but it is a bigger, more intense, harder battle, and it's 100% one that you definitely want to check out. And this game also has one of my favorite ending cinematics of all time. If you've never seen the original Top Gun, this is basically a scene-for-scene recreation of the ending of Top Gun when Maverick lands on the aircraft carrier, except done by Sega with a helicopter. I was going to put them side by side, but unfortunately that Top Gun footage threw up a flag, so I really can't show you much of it whatsoever. But take my word for it, if you've never played Gunblade NY, you 100% owe it to yourself to do so. But if you have played it recently in arcades or back in the day, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, because I would be curious. This is just one of those games, when I first played it, I absolutely fell in love with it, and I've been playing it pretty much every year ever since. Now, I will say taking a nap on a helicopter, probably the most uncomfortable place you could possibly think of doing it. I have been on many helicopters in my life as a filmmaker, never taken a nap, and probably never will. But yeah, Gunblade New York, it's 10 out of 10, classic Model 2 era Sega. There's absolutely nothing about this game that I would improve. I just wish we could get a VR version for like PlayStation VR 2 or the Oculus Quest. I think that would be incredible. Short of that, I'll be back next Wednesday with another Model 2 game, and I'll have videos through the week as well. But Gunblade New York is Sega doing everything perfectly in my opinion. I absolutely love the game. It's a Hall of Fame first ballot arcade classic. See you guys next time. Bye bye.